All right, let's start. This is lecture number 12 out of a series of 11 other lectures. If you want to see the other ones, they're on this website, yeshuathesavior.com. So it's not; these things are supposed to build on each other. One of the videos got removed from YouTube. I had tens and tens of views. Okay, I told my wife, now that I'm famous, I expect some respect around here. So she went to Switzerland for a month. So I don't know if you want to see the missing video. Frank and Phil could probably get it on Vimeo.
Do you know why it got taken down specifically?
COVID. Disinformation. It's the last one that we did. Last time we met was what, 2 years ago? It's been a while. So COVID was interesting. Turned out much more traumatic than I thought. I thought it was going to fizzle out really quick, but it didn't. It lasted a year, 2 years. It had a dramatic impact on society. The spirit of fear that possessed the world. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, I was on an island in Belize that was the size of, it was 6 feet wide and 10 feet long, and there was a sign on it saying, please maintain social distance. There was nobody on the island, and if you wanted to maintain social distance, there wasn't not enough land to maintain 6 feet because the island wasn't that wide. But somebody paid to stick a sign that says, please maintain social distance. So what happened in COVID was interesting in a couple of arenas. Before we do that, I don't know if anybody goes to Maranatha, but they sent 5 red heifers to Israel recently. And if you know what that means is that in the Jewish mindset, you need a perfectly red cow or brown, and it cannot have any white hairs or black hairs. And that is a sign from God that when you take that cow and then they sacrifice it, burn it, and with those ashes, they could actually purify temple number 3. Without a red heifer, you can't get the whole sacrificial system going, and temple 3 would just sit there vacant if it wasn't for these red cows. So it's interesting how the evangelical church is all of a sudden getting together with Orthodox rabbis who don't even believe that Jesus is the Messiah, but they're collaborating on this project. So if you want to read or know more about it, just type in red heifer. It's all over the Israeli news. It didn't make it much in our news. Okay, so going back to COVID, what COVID really did is it cemented the world in a spirit of fear. We told people to stop working. We shut down our churches. Our abortion clinics stayed open, though. They were essential. And we doubled or tripled the money supply of the planet. Now, I don't know what happens in economics when you double the money supply and tell people not to work for 2 years, what that's going to do to inflation. It's probably predictable. And now we're saying that inflation is, we don't know where it came from. It's like a boogeyman that just came out of the bushes. It's like, well, we created it when we printed all that money, we threw it out of the helicopter, and at the same time, we could have almost dealt with the expansion of the money supply. But once we told people to stop producing, that created supply chain problems, so no goods coming in. Everybody's got tons of cash. What's going to happen to the price of everything? So that's what's going on with inflation. What else? It seems like they almost got Mr. Fauci, the good doctor here, to admit that they were doing gain of research function. Now, what that means is they were taking a virus that was highly lethal, but not highly transmissive. Stuff like AIDS is highly lethal, but it's hard to get. Something like the common cold is easy to get, but it's not lethal. So what these guys were doing is they were genetically modifying a virus to make it highly transmissible and highly lethal at the same time. And to do that, you have to start genetically manufacturing it. And you couldn't do that in America. It was illegal. It's against, terrorist laws and stuff. So they subbed it out to the Wuhan lab in China. Just like when we paint our boats. Can't paint it in America, but the good paint, you get it in China or Mexico because they could use all the lead and stuff. So that was an interesting turn of events. They never admitted how it came out to society, whether it was released on purpose or whether it was released on accident. But the damage and the trauma that it has done, I would say it was a biblical scale event. Now we find ourselves with this war in Ukraine. Now, this is the world map, and you're going to see there's several cultural fault lines. You know, like tectonic plates, when you got two continents pushing up against each other, there's friction, there's earthquakes. We just had one in San Jose. There's cultural tectonic plates scattered throughout the world. Like we got one between Mexico and the United States. Right here at Tijuana, there's a fault line between Protestantism and Roman Catholicism. And you can see the tension. You go to the Tijuana border, and you see the walls, and then there's a fence, and then there's a fence on top of the fence, and then there's razor wire on top of the fence, and then there's the guy with the gun to shoot anybody that comes across. There's tension between these two areas. You won't find that between America and Canada, and you won't find it between any of these countries. The fault line of the two cultures is there. There's another fault line in Turkey. Right here, this is where Christendom meets Islam. These are the Islamic worlds, and they meet here at the Bosphorus. These two cultures collide. There's another one in Israel. There's a cultural fault line in Israel that everything in Israel is based on Orthodox Judaism, and all the countries around Israel, every one of their neighbors are Islamic. So along that border, there's a ton of tension. And then, of course, there's the one where, now go back to where we were. Then there's the big one between Eastern Europe and Western Europe. And this is a cultural fault line between Eastern Orthodoxy and Western Orthodoxy. They're both Christian, but for some reason this Christianity is divided into East, West. This is headquartered from our Pope in Rome, and these guys, I think, their headquarters is probably Moscow. I don't know where it is, but we don't like them. They don't like us. And this fault line has been very active throughout history. World War I starts here. World War II starts here. Now, sometimes the line moves back and forth depending. Then the reason why we care about this one is because World War III, now we hear in the news, might start here. Plus, there's something special about these two particular fault lines, is that both sides have enough nuclear weapons to blow up every planet, everything, every life on Earth. That is never no other fault line has that. Usually only one side has the nukes, and the other sides just follow along like the puppy. But Russia is not like that. And if you look at it, historically, most of the world has been given a chance to run the planet. Egypt used to be at the top of the food chain for a while, okay? But now there has been empire. We go there to look at the ruins. The thing is falling apart. There's nothing left. After Egypt ran the joint, the Babylonians ran the joint, and then the Persians. Persia is basically Iran. Iran was the global empire, and now nobody even knows where Iran is. Then after that, we had the Greeks. You know, look at that building that was at the glory that they had. Well, that's what it looks like today. We go there to literally see one rock falling down on top of each other. And, you know, as far as military might, nobody thinks, ooh, the Greek soldier, somebody to fear. I mean, what do we get from Greeks? A salad? After Greeks, we got the Romans. Same thing. You walked up to a Roman soldier 2,000 years ago, and you would be quaking in your boots. Today, you know, the Italian military pride. I mean, we got our asses kicked by Libya in World War II. So we had to have the Germans come in and defend Italy because we couldn't even keep Italy going. So we no longer have the pride. You know, you go to an American church and when there's the pride for the military, we all stand up. We don't do that in Italy. We make fun of our cops and our military. Even the Asians got a chance to run the world for a while. Genghis Khan in the East, they were expanding their empire like crazy. Eventually, it falls. Notice that all the languages, the Spanish people, the Ottomans, these guys were when were they at peak power? Turkish people, 1300 AD, they were at their peak, and now nobody cares about Turkey at all. The only thing about Turkey is that we were fighting when we put our nuclear weapons in, and then Russia got pissed off and put them in Cuba, and then that caused the Cuban Missile Crisis, so then we decided, okay, we'll take them out of Cuba. We'll take them out of Turkey, and you take them out of Cuba. We settled the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's the last time that America and Russia went head to head. So after the Ottomans, you had the Spanish, they were going strong until the Spanish Armada. Remember that? 1400-ish. And then somebody sank the Spanish Armada, and nobody's ever cared about Spain ever since. The French, they were something, 1800, Napoleon, right up until he went up against Russia, and Russia handed him his ass and told him go back home, and that was the end of the French military. So the German, the Japanese, they got a chance to be at the top of the food chain. It didn't last long, 10-something years. But all of these nations were defeated in a strong military conflict, so their pride and arrogance has been tempered. God's kind of been saying, look, I wanted Israel to be the leader of the world, and if the Jews would have obeyed him, and we would have obeyed the Jews, things would have gone God's way. But that didn't happen. Israel immediately disobeys, and they go off on their own. God implodes the nation in 70 AD, and there is no more Israel. So they lasted for about 2,000 years trying to do it their own way. Even their history was broken up into 4 chunks. There was the patriarchs, the fathers, then there was the 500 years of the judges, and then we had 500 years of the son and the kings. And then in the last 500 years of Israel, the priests ran the show. And at the end, it falls under the Roman Empire takes it out and destroys it in 70 AD. Now, who's left? You got the English and the Russian and the Chinese. Now, these guys are the winners of World War II. Now, yes, you put England and France in there, but at the end of the day, it was the English-speaking people. Let's merge England and the U.S. into one. And the Russian and Chinese, these people have never really lost a modern war. So the pride and the arrogance, Russians are known to be tough people. They just do not back down. And you look at what's been going on with NATO. This is NATO. In 1949, this is NATO. It stops here. And then we pushed it to here. And then we pushed it to here. Now, you go up to a guy like Putin, who's got nuclear weapons enough to blow up the entire planet, and you keep crowding and pushing him. This would be the equivalent of going up to the United States and saying, hey, we're thinking of putting nuclear weapons in Tijuana. Okay, we would never accept that. So the idea of Ukraine becoming part of NATO is the same thing as going up to an average American and telling him, hey, we want to give Texas to Russia. What do you guys think about that? It's just culturally not going to happen. And the whole idea was when the Warsaw Pact fizzled out. We have a Warsaw Pact. Yeah, these are the countries that were with Russia. And the idea was that these were going to fight on their side, and this is the West and this was the East. And of course, everybody has chosen to keep moving the line west. Why? Because you make more money over here. You got a McDonald's over here, and you don't over here. So there was a strong economic incentive to keep pushing this line forward. Now, what you didn't need is our politicians going up to the Ukrainian leadership and basically bribing them and drowning them with cash, saying, here's military aid, here is NATO money, if you adopt our charters, if you adopt our laws, and if you start hating Russia like we hate Russia. And if you noticed, when the last aid check during Trump's administration was $300 or $400 million that was already destined to go to Ukraine, and Trump vetoed it. That was his way of saying to Putin, hey, I don't want to escalate with you, Because what's going on is Ukraine is being used now as the bumper between a fight between the West and the East. And they just happen to be in the middle of it. So their choice is either we go with the West, and then we give them just enough ammunition to kill themselves with. We don't give them anything strong enough to really piss off Russia. And now they're just getting squeezed from both sides. We won't let them into NATO. They don't want to become part of Russia. So you have this conflict that has been going on for 8 or 9 months. It's escalating, and we have no end in sight. Now, why they attacked Ukraine in the Crimean Peninsula, Russia did in 2014. Go back to a map, and nobody cared. You know, they lost a chunk of Crimea, which was like this over here. And we were upset at Russia for a week. We didn't drink vodka for 2 months, and then we started drinking tequila, and we forgot about the whole thing when nobody cared. So it could be that this war fizzles out too. I'm not saying it's going to escalate into a global catastrophe. However, I am saying that when you put this together with COVID, we get to an interesting picture. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that's talked about in the book of Revelation, in the book of Ezekiel, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse are kind of like this scene in Braveheart. And if you notice, before you got these 2 humongous armies, and before they start whacking each other to a bloody mess, you send 4 horses, and then they send 4 horses, and these 4 horses try to set up some peace terms, and if there's a peace term, everybody goes home and lives that day. If those horsemen do not come to terms, they go back and they tell their peeps, whip out the guns and start fighting. I think that the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse is literally God and the forces of darkness having this meeting where they each send out their 4 horses and they're getting ready for a battle. Push play, let's see how Mel Gibson, notice that he actually says, I'm there to pick a fight.
Now what do we do? Just be yourselves. Where are you going? You going to pick a fight?
See, he actually wanted the fight. He did not want the peace terms. And notice there's 4 horses. There's 4 horses on our side, on his side, and there's 4 horses over here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the 4 horsemen of the book of Revelation, they're also talked about in the book of Ezekiel, the white, the red, the black, and the pale horse. They're referenced as pestilence, war, famine, and death. And I'm talking about biblical level pestilence. I'm talking about biblical level, not a small regional conflict. This is global. Now, another word for pestilence would be virus. So, could you say that COVID was a horseman? Yeah, I think it would qualify as a global event. It didn't kill very many people. It did. I think the average population dropped 1 or 2 years. Insurance deaths have gone up by 3 or 4%. There was an impact. Now, I don't know if that's because of COVID or because of our reaction to COVID, but it was a global event and it was extremely traumatic. The war in Ukraine is not at a biblical level yet. However, how many articles have you read lately that talks about nuclear weapons popping off? Asking Israel to pick a side. And it's like Israel's trying to be real, no, we're neutral, we can't offend Russia. Half of Israel is Russia, is literally Russian Jews. And the other half is trying to dance with America. So the whole world, if this becomes a biblical level event, the whole world is going to be asked to take a side. And you're going to be on the one or on the other, and nobody's going to be allowed to be neutral. So we're not there yet, but all the news articles, I've read more articles on nuclear war, tactical nuclear weapon. Oh, that's just a small one. Really? That small one is about the size of 5 Hiroshima bombs. There's no such thing as a small tactical nuclear weapon. Now, Russia and Ukraine are starting to blame each other. They're saying Russia is going to use a dirty bomb. And then Ukraine says, no. Russia says Ukraine is going to do it to themselves, and they're going to blame us for it. They're already almost getting ready for the propaganda, because the propaganda is totally blocked off. We don't listen to Russian news, and we can only play our side of the story, and they can't listen to their side. There's no freedom of communication between the two sides. Martial law has been imposed in Ukraine, and all media has been blacked out so that you could only listen to one side of the story. So it's very easy to lie to both sides. So that's a formula for an escalation. Now again, it's a proxy war between the US and Russia. Russia's exports right now are wheat, gas, oil, metals, and fertilizer. The price of all that stuff has doubled. So we're literally paying for both sides of this war. We give the missiles to Ukraine, and then we buy the Russian gas through our goods that we buy from China and India, and we're paying Putin to shoot down the weapons that we sent to Ukraine. So that's why we're paying $8, $9 a gallon of gas, because we have to pay for both sides of this war. The Russian ruble is at an all-time high. So economically, Russia is really, we read sanctions are really hurting them, sanctions are really hurting them. The ruble is very strong. The Ukrainian currency is very weak. And the dollar is very strong. The euro is weak, the pound is weak. Everybody is weak except these two guys. The big guys have strong currency, and everybody else is suffering. Okay, so what am I bringing all this up? Just to keep in mind that if you start seeing these events play out, like a global virus that turns into a global war, and then of course after that you have famine / hyperinflation. We already have the seeds of famine. Give me the world insecurity. That's what that is? This is world insecurity map. Hunger is like this level, and after that there's not enough food for you to live. There'd be death. Now notice the blue countries are fine, and the purple, the dark purples, the Africas, they've been starving since ever, so we don't really care. However, imagine if you throw the world into an economic tailspin because of a war, and now you drop every category a notch or two, which means that the blues become greens or orange. You could easily see how all of these areas here could easily turn into horse number 4, which is deaths to the tune of 20% of world population. Now that's a biblical level event. You start having 1 billion people dying off, you are officially in the end times. And that's what we need to be focused on, because we are approaching the end of our 6,000 years of human history, and we are waiting for our Messiah, our conquering king, to come and fix this mess that we're in. But until that happens, we have to finish off this last millennium. And so we need to be not afraid of it. We're actually kind of excited about it, but we need to be aware of what's going on. Okay. We have the title for tonight's message was How to Exalt a Nation. What makes a nation strong and what makes a nation weak? And Proverbs, written by Solomon, the king right after David, right around here, he wrote, with God's blessings, righteousness exalteth a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. Notice it doesn't say that military might exalts a nation. It doesn't say that money, it doesn't say that geography, it doesn't say that natural resources exalts a nation. Israel didn't have very many natural resources, and they were doing really good at the top of their game. Right around the middle of the 6,000 years of human history, the kingdom of Israel was prospering, and all the neighbors were doing great too, because of good governorship and good rulership and good laws. So, what happens? Well, we have general commandments that God gives us, do this, don't do that. And that puts you into a left and right sort of thinking. This is the good, this is the bad, don't do this, do that. And then there's other ideas, like sometimes the right is kind of in the middle. And if you go to both extremes, you start getting into unrighteous territory. So now let's look at the first guy who sets up a nation that fell apart. God said, when we got off the boat, to make the world, that Shem, should have been the leader of the pie. But we're anti-Shemitic. We didn't listen to God. We didn't pay attention to that. And so we listened to a guy named Nimrod, and he sets up the first kingdom. Now, what is it? This guy sets up the Tower of Babel, you know the story, that God scatters, he stops the kingdom from getting built and distributes, and that's when you start having all the languages, by the way. That's what this little thing is. He's a tower of all the languages that came from this guy. And that's his wife, Semiramis. Now, these people had an interesting lifestyle. These were not, they didn't take their morality for sexual ideals from God. They were the partying type. The sex festivals and the orgies that they had during the spring was their claim to fame. And then, of course, after that, 9 months later, you have a bunch of unwanted pregnancies. So right around December 25th, you get a bunch of unwanted babies that are sacrificed to the fire god or god of Moloch. And God told Israel, do not do this. And for a while, they stayed away from it. And then eventually, they started taking these pagan practices into Israel, and it took the nation down. Now, what was it about this couple that was interesting is that we are still living under the religion of these two. This girl, she gets pregnant on one of these sex festivals, and she delivers birth to a guy on December 25th, and she calls him the resurrected son of her dead husband. This dude's dead. She's pregnant, and she says that it's her son is Tammuz, which is him resurrected. Deity, and gave the kid deity. And people started worshiping this kid as God. And he was born on December 25th, and the pagans latched onto it. This culture is universal. It applies to all over the world. And of course, the Jews put up the anthropomorphos, this concept of attributing deity to something human, or attributing human traits to something that is not human. Basically crossing the lines between kingdoms. The kingdoms are divine, they're angelic, they're human, they're animal, they're plant, and they're mineral. What anthropomorphism is when you say that something is divine. Now, the pagans, we grew up on saying stuff was divine. We see a tree, divine. We look at the sun, divine. We look at the moon, divine. You leave us on an island, and we'll turn a volleyball into God. Wilson. So the idea of idolatry for us, we grew up on idolatry. We love it. Now, to the Jew, they're so allergic to this idea, and they're saying, that's where you guys got the concept of the New Testament. We reject the divinity of Jesus because it comes from this pagan tradition, and that has absolutely nothing to do with Judaism. But I would say, if we go back a notch, go to the verse that says, her seed, the Genesis verse. I don't think Lucifer, who got the idea, we didn't copy it from Lucifer. I think Lucifer copied it from God. The idea of the seed of the woman and being made in God's image. And God said, let us make man in our image. Well, that's anthropomorphosis right there. I didn't start it. God started it. He took this being called man and made him in his image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth. And God created man in his own image, meaning we look like him. Now look, when you have a kid, your son looks like you, he's made in your image. Well, if we're made in God's image, there's something about us that looks like God. Now, give me the male and female one. And there's something about the male and female that also says that we were made in his image. No. It's the one that's, be fruitful and multiply. And God said, let us make man our image. Male and female created he them. It's not the one. There's one that shows that it's Genesis 5. this is the book of Genesis, that God created man. In the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them and blessed them and called their name Adam. Notice now he merged them. Now he merged man and woman, calls them one name. He's no longer treating them like two. And begot a son in our own likeness after his image and called his name Seth. So this is saying God had these two as their kid, as his kid, and then these two had Seth as their kid. Now what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is that over here, right in the first book of the Bible, you have two images that are created that are in God's image. Husband and wife merged into one, and man himself. So put some pictures of some babies and marriage. What is it about what is it about a human being? There's something about a human being that is made in God's image. Okay? Now, I think the best time to see that is a baby. And you could tell there's some, and then the other one is a marriage. There's something about these two pictures that God says, I've put my image there and there. Now, we're taught that human beings are inherently sinful. They're full of sin. Like, does this thing look like it's full of sin to you? I mean, it could grow up to be a nasty dude. Okay, I've been there, done that. If I show you the pictures of men in prison, they don't look like this. But at this level, I think that these things are stamped with God's image, and there's something about them that is beautiful, wholesome, clean, and lovely. And there's something about a wedding that does the exact same thing. Why is it every time we walk to a wedding, everybody stops and looks? I think that humanity is programmed to say there's something about God's image that floats in these two pictures. Now, so what? Well, notice how much time we spend attacking these two ideas. Pull up infanticide. And I'm not talking about abortion. I'm talking about killing kids that are 2 years old, okay, that are 1 year old. You would think that it's something that happens, in our modern culture. No. Ancient Greece, ancient Rome, China, Japan, Australia, Native Americans, Alaskans. I mean, everybody got into the baby killing business. India, Ming Dynasty, 1300. China was doing it from 79 up until yesterday with the one-child policy. For some reason, in America, we abort 1 out of every 3 kids. Let's talk about the third. When we do things Satan's way, remember, Satan's part of an angelic realm, and he's leading a rebellion, and he took 1/3 of the angels with him. So the whole planet has got a little kink. We're a third off. You know what I mean? We kill 1 out of every 3 kids. If you look at the planet, the thing is crooked. The whole planet is crooked. It's not straight. What? It's like it wasn't made this way. God made it this way. But now it's crooked. See, it spins the wrong, it's on an angle. And you know what the angle is? It's 23.4 degrees. It's on a 23.4 degree angle. Well, if you look at it from this side, it's 23. But if you look at it from this side, that's 66.6. The whole Earth is tweaked. The sun and the moon are tweaked. We're supposed to be on a 360-day rotation for the sun and 12 lunar months that are 30 days each. But we don't have that. The moons take like 355 days to do 12 cycles. The sun takes 365 and a quarter. Everything's a little off. It's not right. I spent 1/3 of my life sleeping. There's no reason for the human body to sleep. 8 out of 24 hours, God literally shuts you down. Why is that? It's like, I'm only going to be on the planet for 75 years, and you're taking 1/3 of my life and shutting me down, and putting me in hibernation. It doesn't make any sense. Look at the woman's cycle. You get women that are following the lunar cycle. In the book of Genesis, it says that after we fell, God greatly multiplied the conception of the woman. You ever think that maybe women who used to be on a yearly cycle, you get pregnant once a year instead of once a month? I think, notice it says, I will greatly, this is after the fall, God says, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. Well, gee, that just takes care of all the birth control problems. I mean, we joked around with my wife, it's like we had sex 4 times, I got 6 kids out of it. Yes, she's not here to defend herself. But you could see that there's something off about the cycle of the woman, the moon, the entire planet. The weeds are fighting with each other. You plant a nice little apple tree, and then there's some weeds that start growing that start trying to kill your apple tree. You have a goat, and there's a coyote that wants to come and eat the goat. And you send your kid out there to play, and then our dog was running around, and a rattlesnake bit him right on the nose. It's like this whole planet is tweaked. It's like a third. It's a third off. Okay. And it's because we've been listening to these angelic beings that are leading a rebellion against our Maker. And until we stop listening, until we disconnect from these turds, we're gonna have problems. And we are not disconnecting from it. We are doing this alive and well. The infanticide, the killing of the children. Now, as you get more and more perverted, and if you go back to infanticide definition, you'll see that the church has always been pushing against infanticide. Christianity forbid the practice. So notice these guys had no problems killing kids. In Europe, during the first millennium, you didn't want the kid. What you did is you didn't kill him. You left him in the trash can. And that was considered perfectly legal, and it was not criminal. It wasn't until us Bible believers like, dude, this cannot happen. So we start pushing the law, prohibition. Let's say that's conception, 6 weeks heartbeat, viability at 23. The baby could hear sounds at 28. It's born at 40. You're talking about 2 years out of this. And it's like, remember when Moses was born? We had to kill the baby boys, and we threw him in the river, and he made it, but everybody else didn't make it. So the society had been in the baby killing business for a long time. During Jesus' time, all the kids in Bethlehem were slaughtered. Jewish tradition, it's not Bible, but Jewish encyclopedia says that even during Abraham's time, when Abraham was born, there was Nimrod's government was persecuting baby boys because he heard that Abraham was going to be a great leader, and then they tried to kill Abraham too, and he had to do a 2-year exodus from the government officials because there was a baby killing machine set up there as well. Now, what is it about? Why is it that the dark side is so possessed about killing babies? Now, of course, the more perverted you get, the more we blur the line this way. I don't think today in America anybody would tolerate killing a 2-year-old baby. However, notice that now we have Proposition 1, what's on the ballot. In California, right now, you could abort a kid up until viability. And they want to move that to birth. And by the way, the definition of birth is plus or minus 7 days. Because, if the woman is in labor, when does the labor start? When does labor end? We want to give her full freedom to choose. So we're gonna do plus or minus 7 days. Now, we want to put a law, and we're voting on this in 8 days, to put in the books of California. And California is a leader in ideas. We distribute all ideas to the world. We distribute them to America, and then America distributes them to the rest of the world. So this is literally what we're talking about. We're trying to figure out, we want to be able to abort a baby not at 23 weeks. We want to be able to abort a baby up until 40 weeks. Now, I don't know if you ever seen what a baby looks like at 40 weeks, but you got a baby at 40 weeks. You got a baby at 28 weeks. I mean, you could sing to your wife's stomach, and that thing will move and respond to sound. It is alive and well. Could you imagine what you're going to do with all these leftover pieces when you commit that? Now, I was going to say in America right now, or at least in California, it's safer to be a puppy than it is to be a baby, because nobody aborts puppies. I bet you if I take my pregnant Rottweiler or German, what's our dog? If I take my golden retriever to the vet that's pregnant, and I say, hey, I want those puppies aborted, how much you'll make a bet that the vet will say, I'm not doing it, that's animal cruelty. That's interesting. So, another thing, notice that it's 40 weeks. There's 40 weeks of labor, and then you get the baby. Notice the 40. Remember Noah's flood, it rained for 40 nights, and then it stopped. Jesus walked in the desert for 40 days, getting tempted by Satan. The Israelites were running in 40 years when Joshua right here was taking them from Egypt into the promised land. It took 40 years to do the journey. 40 years of tribulation, labor, pain, suffering. Notice that from Jesus' first coming, let's call this the exodus of the Gentiles. We have about 2,000 years between his first and second coming. The Gentiles are doing a 40-year, there's 40 jubilees of 50 years. We're doing our 40 years to get to our 2,000. So it took the Jews 40 years of going in circles to get in. The Gentiles, there's a lot more of us, or a lot more rebellious. It's taken us 2,000 years to hatch, to get our king established on the throne. But my point is that the more perverted you are, the more you're going to move the line that way. And the less perverted a country is, you're going to eventually get to the point where conception is respected, because you realize that God's image got planted right here. So if you start loving God's image, you're going to love that thing, whatever it is. You're not going to touch it. You're going to allow it to grow. What else? We got the marriage. How do we attack that? You got your standard attack. We used to do the classics. We got the pornography and the prostitution and fornication and adultery. These used to be our go-to attacks against our marriage. But now we brought in the big guns. We're bringing in the L's and the G's and the B's and the T's. I mean, we're not just attacking it, we're obliterating it. We got a little pregnant man emoji on my Apple phone. It's like, a woman is a man with a womb. Woo-man. You start getting a man pregnant and you've obliterated. You just destroyed. If these images, put those babies and marriages back, if these pictures had had something anthropomorphic about it, by the time these guys are done with it, there's nothing left. You put man and tranny. I mean, speaking to some executives, we're going into a world where the last 10 or 20 years ago, we did the feminism thing. And then the last 10 years, we did the homosexuality thing. We've actually legalized it in culture, and now it's normalized. And it's actually cool. Now, what they're doing in the next 10 years, speaking to these high-level executives at Disney, they're saying that what we need to do is we need to normalize the merger of animals and men. That's their agenda for the next 10 years of entertainment, where there's not going to be we've already merged the difference between man and woman. You can't tell them apart. We dress the same. You go to the Express men, Express women, and you could shop like this way, and you can't tell them apart. So we've merged them. But we haven't merged animals. I mean, this thing is a tree, for crying out loud. We're merging. We haven't gotten to that. But what you're going to see, and I mean by I'm talking about bestiality. We're going to see the idea of the merger in our arts, where you're going to see half men, half animals, as a complete violation of the sanctity. And notice what they have in the middle. What they have in the middle is a normal guy, okay? And then flanked by all the perversions, half animal, half woman, half animal, half man, half tree, half man. This is some demonic thing. I don't even know what the heck it is. And the green woman over there, I don't know, I guess it was Captain Kirk's girlfriend. But be aware, but look out for this in our future art, because I think it's going to be more prevalent, and you're going to see it in the next 10 years. Okay, so how do we destroy, that's how we destroy an image of God. Remember, God is trying to relate to humanity in two ways. He wants to be our father. Put the babies and the wives back up. He wants to be our father. So that's kind of like us, and he wants to be our dad and take care of us. That's one of the things he describes as his relationship towards humanity. And the other way he describes himself is as a husband. Israel was the bride. The New Testament says the church is the bride of Christ. So, see, the bride, that's us. The man, that's God. So when you destroy that, when you get an abusive husband, you make God look bad. When you get a rebellious wife that tries to overpower and dominate the husband, you make the church look bad. But notice the connotation. Now compare this to, you know those movies where you got the drug dealer, he's at the club, and he's surrounded by 3 women on this side and 3 women on this side. He's got his little harem with him. Those aren't his wives, those are his girlfriends. He mistreats them, he treats them like dirt, but for some reason these women don't leave. It's like, what is he giving them? What kind of drugs is he giving these girls to stick around? I never understood that. They're treated like crap. And you know what? Humanity has been doing the exact same thing. For the last 6,000 years, we've refused the marriage to God. So, and the choice, of course, is you're either going to be God's bride or Satan's bitch. And we've chosen option number 2. It's not permanent. Eventually, like I said, after the 40 years in the desert, we do figure it out and we disconnect ourselves from this tyrant, from this jerk, from this drug dealing fool. But for now, we're still listening and we're still obeying him. Look at our laws, the way we create the 10 Commandments. We're moving society towards a socialist agenda. Why? Socialism is literally based on violating the 10th commandment. Thou shalt not covet is the 10th commandment. What does socialism teach? So that's great. Socialism teaches that you compare your check to the other guy's paycheck. And if he gets more than you, then it's not fair. If you're a woman, you got to get paid as much as the man. If you're a tall guy, you got to get paid as much as the short guy. You could have an employee who's perfectly happy until he sees what the other guy got, and now he's upset all of a sudden because he thinks that something unfair happened. It's the idea of looking at anybody who's got more than you and feeling screwed. And of course, in a society that is totally different, God has made everybody differently. He cannot make everybody the same. That'd be boring and ugly. Beauty, for example, you go to a plastic surgeon and they'll tell you the most beautiful man or woman is the guy that's right in the middle of the spectrum. So the guy with the biggest nose and the guy with the smallest nose, the most beautiful nose is the one in the middle. The distance between the eyes. Some people are real far apart, some people are really close. The most beautiful woman, you go to the plastic surgeon, and they really kind of know how beauty works. And that's probably what Adam and Eve look like. Now, you see Hollywood. These guys have figured it out. So after about 10, 20 years, can you tell the difference between any of the Kardashians or any other actress? They all start looking the same because they're all trying to go to that perfect point. Now, if you can make yourself the most beautiful person in the world, and imagine if every other person looked exactly the same way, you've taken the value of beauty and thrown it right out the trash can. Same thing with men. You cannot change, you cannot get equality and diversity and merge them together. As what we're trying to do is literally impossible. When you homogenize everything, you actually ruin it. The value of the diamond would literally go away if you homogenized it with everything around it. It would no longer be a diamond. So everything having to do with distinction. Under socialism, having a rich guy, having a poor guy, says, we all need to be equal. And of course, it's always you have to be equally poor. God says God owns the planet. You know, when we go around, this is my land, and the father, Russia, homeland, and fatherland, and motherland, and Dutch land. And it's always, this is mine, and the Mexicans think that this is my land. And the Bible says that none of us own anything. Just because your mom popped you out on this piece of dirt does not make it yours. You didn't build it, and God didn't give it to you. So why do we preach socialism? And we even know that socialism doesn't work. Russia itself was abandoning it. Russia, over the last 10, 20 years, their standard of living has gone way up because they moved away from the areas of socialism. They were seeing that, guys, we are losing the empire. NATO keeps coming closer and closer to us because we keep trying to, with these failed economic laws, and the West is being more successful. And so nations are choosing to go with them, and they're losing their caboose. They're losing their influence. So now they're like, okay, we're going to use our military. We're going to draw the line at Ukraine. We are not going to allow any more of this Western presence. Now, in Putin's defense, when you look at the perversions of the West, put the split of Israel. If you look at when Israel split, 10 tribes went north, 2 tribes went in the south. These were the libs. These were the Democrats. And these guys were the Republicans. And these guys, I would say, they were the rebels. And these guys were the zealots. Because when you don't obey God's law, you're either going to go one way or the other. You're either going to become a rebel, a liberal, do everything goes, or you're going to become a zealot. You become so staunch in obeying the law that you forget what you're doing it for. And you divide the kingdom between the libs and the conservatives, and then eventually the whole thing fell. Now, that same thing is happening in the United States right now. As a matter of fact, the same thing is happening between the East and the West. And guess who's taken the position of the conservative? Putin is over there saying, we don't allow LGBT marriages in our country. Well, do you want your Russian kid to go through a sex change operation at 12 years old? And those Russian grandmas say, no, that's evil. All right, well, then we need to send our soldiers and defend our territory of Ukraine because the West is coming over there and turning them into a bunch of pansies. That's literally what the propaganda of Russia is saying. And that's actually true. We went up to Ukraine and say, if you want to join NATO, you have to adopt gay marriage as part of your constitution. And I've been to Ukraine. Those people ain't ready to adopt gay marriage into the Constitution. We were shoving it down their throats, saying, we'll give you money, we'll give you weapons if you do this. So now we've given Putin now. Now Putin is the moral high ground, and he's the good conservative guy. And it's like, how do we go from being you go ultra left, and then your choice is ultra right. And righteousness goes right out the window, and the people suffer. Look at another thing, like law enforcement and law and order. Do we have a picture of ultra left says defund the police, riot? We went into Vaughn's the other day, and it's like, you know that a bum could walk into Vaughn's, and if he steals $900 worth of liquor, nobody will touch him and nobody will prosecute him. So the guy, every morning, walks into the store, he loads up the cart with $999 worth of liquor, and he walks right out, and nobody says anything. Okay, defund the police, lack of law and order, total libs, right? This is the left. That's what the left is going to get you. But now let's look at the right. We swing the thing the other way, and you get militarism. You get cops that look like, give me a picture of the Chinese guy, the Chinese cops. If you talk trash about the Chinese government or the Russian government, you'll end up in jail or dead. So notice that my choice is between a tyrannical government or a laissez-faire government, but good law and order in the middle, for some reason, is not an option. Yeah, that picture there. Like, when the police officers show up in SWAT, riot gear, and military equipment, you know that the country has lost its balance. That's not what law enforcement is supposed to look like. Give me a picture of what law enforcement is supposed to look like. What is supposed to look like? The cop is supposed to, yeah, that's what the cop is supposed to look like. To protect and to serve. This is normal, okay? That's not normal, and that's not normal. But notice that the left and the right, well, give me that crazy Republican guy that became the face of the January 6th. Yeah, see what I mean? For this guy to be associated with the right, that's when you know that, okay, it's no longer between left and right. Now it's between wacko A versus wacko B, and this has got nothing to do with normal people. Normal people look at this and they barf. Show from the slide that says what cocaine does, what Fox News does. Yeah, look at this. You know, we're mostly conservatives in the room, so we don't want to. But you see, from the liberal point of view, this is what happens when you watch Fox News. You become a right-wing nut job, okay, like crack cocaine, alcohol, and whatever. So look at our immigration laws. The Bible had an immigration policy for Israel, and you were supposed to let people, if somebody wanted to come into Israel, the stranger was a respected individual. He did not get anything for free. You didn't give him free health care, you didn't give him free medicine, you didn't give him free housing, and you didn't give him free transportation. What you did give him was access to the gleanings. The harvest in Israel was broken up into three chunks: the first fruits, the main harvest, and then the gleanings. So the first fruits belong to God. The first things that sprout up, you give those to God. Then you get the big chunk of the harvest. This is what we used to do in Italy when we go in the summer. That's when you get 90% of the wheat back into the barn. But the gleanings, the last 10%, you weren't supposed to pick your field dry to the bone. You were supposed to leave a little bit there so that anybody, the poor, the homeless, the destitute, could easily go there, pick up the pieces and eat and survive. So there was an internal welfare system in the scriptures. But notice that you have to work for it. You don't just sit at home and get a government welfare check mailed to you, and then if that's not enough to buy food, you can steal $999 worth of liquor without getting punished. It's not that thing at all. So the immigrant, the stranger, was never allowed to vote. Now, why would it be nuts to allow an immigrant to vote? Because an immigrant is leaving his culture. The reason why he's leaving his culture is because his culture sucks. That's why he's coming into yours. So if you allow a bunch of these people in and you allow them to vote, they're going to make your country look like their country. And now you've defeated the entire purpose of the immigration. So put what we have on the bottom of the Statue of Liberty when it comes to immigration. This used to be our attitude towards immigration. And for some reason, over the last 20, 30 years, we've adopted this idea of the left, who's in control of our borders today. We were trying to bring a Ukrainian boy in from Ukraine. And we had two problems. A, the country of Ukraine wouldn't let him out. So we had a struggle to get him out of Ukraine because the first thing they did is declared martial law. And the second country that wouldn't let him in was the United States. So I call a lawyer, and we're on the phone with a Jewish lawyer trying to figure out what to do. And then this lady's like, okay, well, let me see. Is he gay? I'm like, no. Is he running a political website against Putin? Like, Is he mentally retarded? Like, no. Is he Muslim? Like, I goes, oh, that's too bad. I go, why is that? Because if he was any of those things, we could get him in right away. So our immigration policy is pro mentally retarded gay Muslims that we're going to let into the country. That's a lot of bells. I go, the kid just wants to go to school. He doesn't need any government support. He'll live in my house. The guy just wants to go to school and work. By the way, he still doesn't have his work certificate. He still cannot legally work. So working, bad. But those other things, we're gonna let him in. Now, what do we have on the right side? You got Trump, the right-wingers. We need to secure our borders. We need to strengthen a wall and tall and fence and this, and then wrap the razor wire. We let nobody in. And what does that do? That just, it gives strength to the other side. Because something inherently in our hearts says that treating a stranger, this is the way you should do it. And when you don't do that, you're a cold-hearted ass. And so our right-wingers have taken the position that makes us look like heartless, unloving individuals, and we get laughed out of the moral high ground. And every time you do that, you actually give strength to the other side. So there's my choice. I could either be a Muslim, gay, political dissident who wants to start a negative website with Putin. The other way he could have gotten in was if he joined the American military. Now, isn't that interesting? They wouldn't let him leave Ukraine because they says you're going to be drafted, so you have to go fight the Russians. So choice A is shoot the Russians from the Ukrainian side, or choice B is join the American military so we could shoot the Russians, I don't know, in some future war tomorrow. Put up there the military spending that we have, Phil. Or look at militarism and what's going on with these countries. And we keep trying to make Russia the bad guy, but as we see that the guy who's cramping in, the guy who's expanding is not the West, it's not the East, it's the West. Look at the American military spending is the blue. Russia is the green. So Russia has to get together with China to even come up with a fighting chance. But keep in mind that most of these other people are our allies. So if you're going to say that Russia is the bully, well, if you're going to call Russia the bully, what are you going to call us? If we are expanding our ideology throughout the globe. Russia just sits there, they wall off, don't bother me and I don't bother you. They've historically, I don't think that they've started an aggressive action. France attacked them. Germany attacked them. So they tell their people, we're always on the defensive. America has aircraft carriers. Those are offensive weapons. Russia, we don't have any aircraft carriers because we're just defensive in nature. You see, by you becoming a militaristic society, instead of really helping people by letting them in the border, imagine we opened the border to Russian citizens. What would happen? I bet you 20 million Russians would move to America. What would that do? Would that hurt Russia? Would that strengthen the United States? Think about it. Imagine if the population of Russia, which is what, 200 million? If you gave the right to immigrate, I know 10 million Ukrainians would move here in a heartbeat. I bet you 20 million Russians would move here in a heartbeat. If there would be a way into the country that would not weaken our culture, that would not destroy our voting, it would not destroy our welfare system because now I have to give you free housing and free schools and free this. And then, of course, the hardworking American is going to say, you know what? Take all these people and send them back home. You start to hate their guts. But if they're allowed to come in here and work and contribute to society, our nation would get stronger. And again, it's not that weird. We've had this immigration policy for the first 100, 200 years of our history. It's what kind of made America great. Today, this immigration policy is actually alive and well in countries like Dubai. In Dubai, if you have a job, they'll let you in. Do they let you vote? No. Do they give you free stuff? No. But you don't need free stuff because you got a job. And because you're there with your visa, you have a work visa. That work visa is what allows you to make $10 an hour versus $2 an hour back in your Pakistan country. So that work visa becomes like the most important document in your life. You think you're going to drive drunk? Hell no, I don't want to lose my work visa. You think you're going to be impolite at the gas station? Hell no, I don't want to lose my work visa. Those guys are the most polite citizens ever. The Arab walks by and those guys, they scoot out of the way. There's a reverence and they appreciate them being there because that Pakistani guy, he's making himself $10 an hour and he's supporting his mom, his aunt, his uncle. He's got 30 people living off of his paycheck. He's like the savior of the family. He's not going to mistreat the Arabs. He actually appreciates it. And when the king walks up and down Dubai, everybody likes the guy. There's no bulletproof vest or hovering with 30 CIA guys, Secret Service agents trying to protect the guy from being killed because nobody wants to kill the guy. It was like When King Solomon walked around, nobody wanted to kill Solomon. Everybody loved him. Why would we kill Solomon? We're prospering underneath his leadership. So the minute you start to see that, something is wrong with our government. What else? You look at grace and love and law. The left is very graceful. They want to tolerate everything. Everything is right. Put the Planned Parenthood picture up. Care no matter what. What did he say? No matter what? Care no matter what. Right. See, no law. It's all grace. We love. There's love with no law. And of course, the other side is we're not going to allow any abortions at all. Well, if the mom's life is in danger, screw her. She can't get. We're not going to allow any exceptions at all. See, that type of thinking is reinforcing the idea that being a right-wing bigot, then the other option is we have to go with the lefties and accept all kinds of things that are inherently wrong in our heart. What else? What do we skip, Phil? Talked about the homeless guy.
Just the right hand of God, I guess you'd say. The right seat. You can bring anything up there.
Oh, the left and the right. Have you noticed? It says that Psalm 110. Put Psalm 110 up. This is King David writing. This is the king of Israel writing at the peak. David and Solomon were the peak of the Israeli history. And this is the government that God had put in place. David was a man after God's own heart. And he writes, the Lord, capital L-O-R-D means Jehovah, J-H-V-H, Yud-He, Vav-He. That's God's name personally. God said unto my boss. Well, who's the boss of David? There's God, there's David. Who's the boss? Who's that? Who's in between? There was nobody on top of David. David was the king of the nation. But Psalm 110, this is him writing that there's somebody in the middle of him and God. And he calls him my Lord. And the Jehovah says unto this being, sit thou at my right hand until I make thy enemies thy footstool. This is the Messiah. This is the Redeemer of the planet Earth. This is who we are saying was Jesus coming as a suffering servant, and when he comes as a conquering king, this is literally what he's going to fulfill. And the Lord shall send the rod of thy strength out of Zion, and rule thou in the midst of thine enemies. Thy people shall be willing in the day with thy power. The beauty of holiness from the womb of the morning, thou hast the dew of thy youth. And the Lord hath sworn and will not repent. Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. This being that sits at the right hand of the Father, this guy right here. And by the way, if you ever think if the Messiah is sitting at the right hand, who is sitting at the left hand? Or who was sitting at the left hand? I think so. I think that's why this whole left and the right thing. I think Satan used to sit on the left hand of the throne, and when he starts his third rebellion, he gets evicted from that position, and he's been sitting on the left ever since. It's just speculation, but there's something. Why is the word right is spelled right? There's right and wrong, and there's left and right. Why is left always wrong? We're suspicious of left-handed people. Have you noticed? You're left-handed? What else, Phil? The destruction of the two temples. Israel had two temples. One got destroyed in 586, right about here, 586 BC, and the other one got destroyed in 70 AD by the Italians. See? That's when we used to have some military strength. Oz says that this temple got destroyed because these guys had the law with no love. They were zealots. And this temple got destroyed because they had love but no law. They were rebels. The mistake that Israel made is something that is embedded into our human heart, And if you want your nation to prosper, we have to learn from these lessons and not do the same thing again. Otherwise, we're going to repeat the exact same mistakes, and we're going to have the same fruits. God's perfect government is called a theocracy. When God wanted to tell the children of Israel how to behave, he says, I'll be your God. It wasn't their idea. It wasn't God's idea for them to have a king. He says, a king is just going to tax you. He's going to take your cash. You don't need a king. Just do what I say and we'll be good. He wanted to be the husband. So that's called a theocracy. Well, we said no to that, and we go, okay, let's go for the next thing. It's called a republic. A republic is a government that's based on the rule of law. And hopefully it's God's law. And that's theoretically what the United States of America is. Pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands. Notice that's the democracy for which it stands. The idea of democracy is a horrible idea that's called democracy, which is rule of the majority. So now 6 out of 10 decide what's right and what's wrong. And this has never, ever worked. From the time that we started playing with the idea in Rome, eventually it always leads to a government that wants to get votes. And the way you get votes is by giving people free stuff. And whoever gives the most free stuff, like in Italy, in our hometown, if you voted for this guy, you didn't get a pound of pasta. If you voted for this guy, you got a free pound of pasta. So guess who won every single election? You see, that, and of course, the guy who was dishing out the pasta was the corrupt guy. Everybody should have voted for the other guy. But democracy always leads to who's giving me more stuff. Free health care, free student loans, free vaccines. This guy's going to get my vote because I get more free stuff. Instead of punishing covetousness, you're rewarding it. The homeless guy, speaking to our Arab friends, he goes, you guys have homeless people? Drug addicts that beat up their wives? He goes, no, we don't have any of that. He goes, what do you mean? He goes, there's never a guy that gets drunk and beats up his wife? He goes, yeah, it happens, but it's very rare. I go, why is that? He goes, because we have a rehab program. I'm like, well, we have a rehab program too. We send tons of, Britney Spears has been out of rehab 18 times. Nothing really changes there. He goes, our rehabs are not like your rehabs. I go, well, tell me about your rehabs. He goes, what we do is the woman calls her dad and says that he hit me. And then the dad says, okay, well, give him another chance. And then she calls a second time and says he did it again. And then the dad calls the cops. And the cops go over there in the middle of the night, and they pick his ass up, and they beat him with a cane. Like they cane him. I go, for how long? 6 months. I'm like, it's a 6-month rehab program. I'm like, interesting. I go, and does it work? He goes, we have a 50% success rate. 50% of the time he goes back home and he's a gem. He never touches the woman again. Like, that's fascinating. I go, what happens to the other 50%? He goes, nobody knows. See, the point is, let's say that they're leaning this way. Okay, but what about on our side where we do absolutely nothing? You can smoke crack outside of our 424 building. We even called the cops. The cops says nothing we can do. The guy stealing $999 worth of liquor from Vaughn's. The lady at the counter, she was so angry even just telling the story. She couldn't stand it anymore. But when you see a total perversion of justice, it demoralizes a nation. Can't have that. Okay, we're out of time. Before we move on, we wanted to do one update on, we did a 5-minute video on the 4 attributes of God. And again, keep in mind, the Jews have a problem with anthropomorphism. So anything divine, and you're going to see why now they can't stand the idea of the Messiah being divine, and then compare that to the Gentiles, who we have absolutely no problems giving divine attributes to the Messiah. What we have a problem with is him being a leader in Israel. Go ahead, push play.
There are 4 main attributes of God that pervade all of the Hebrew and Christian scriptures. In Ezekiel 1, 3, 5, and 10, and again in Revelations 4, 6 through 7, 4 creatures are used to describe these characteristics of God. These attributes are mentioned in various ways all throughout Scripture. If we study these attributes, it becomes clear that overlooking any one of them gives us an incomplete understanding of God's character and divides people against each other when we emphasize only the attributes we like the most. In the book of Numbers in the Old Testament, the 4 attributes are personified as an eagle, a man, an ox, and a lion. These 4 symbols are the images found on the 4 banners that the 12 tribes of Israel grouped themselves under when they gathered around the tabernacle in ancient times. The tribe of Reuben is represented by the image of a man, the tribe of Dan, an eagle, the tribe of Judah, a lion, and the tribe of Ephraim is represented by an ox. This imagery is not only found in the Bible, but also in Jewish scholarship, such as the Jewish Encyclopedia. Each of these 4 images represent an essential aspect of God's character. The eagle is the apex predator that flies the highest of all birds of prey. Nothing flies above it. It flies alone, sees everything, and is seen by no one. The eagle represents God's sovereignty, omniscience, omnipresence, and singularity. Like an eagle, God is above us and sees all. On the opposite end of the spectrum is the man, who is physical and of the earth. The man is flesh and blood, with limited sight, presence, and knowledge. God exhibits both divinity and humanity. He is a spiritual being, yet also created people in his own image, and came down to earth as a human when he walked in the Garden of Eden with Adam, ate with Abraham, wrestled with Jacob, and spoke face to face with Moses. The ox represents a humble, suffering servant who gives everything. He is a beast of burden who carries a heavy burden across his shoulders that's not his own, it's ours. Just like an ox plows a hardened field, this servant plows our hardened hearts, gets whipped, and is ultimately killed, despite his selflessness. The ox is contrasted with the lion, who is a conquering king with ultimate authority. There's one law, and it's the lion's law. The lion rules with an eye towards justice, not grace or mercy. He vanquishes his enemies violently. Vengeance belongs to the lion. He's a general, the Lord of hosts. At the center of the intersection of these attributes is Jesus, embodying all 4 characteristics fully and perfectly. The 4 Gospels of the New Testament show Jesus in light of these 4 attributes, depending on who the audience was for that particular book. Matthew presents Jesus as the lion, a conquering king. Mark talks about Jesus as a beast of burden and suffering servant. Luke traces Jesus' lineage back to Adam to emphasize his humanity. And John discusses Jesus as the eagle, the divine word of God. The major religions of the world emphasize only some of the attributes of God, and therefore pursue a Messiah that doesn't meet the requirements of the humble, authoritative, human, and divine Redeemer. Islam falls in the top right of the grid, emphasizing a Messiah who is strong, authoritative, monotheistic, divine being with a conquering, sword-bearing prophet. Orthodox and secular Judaism arrive in the bottom right, waiting on a Messiah who is human and will conquer all enemies of Israel to establish a powerful and peaceful kingdom on earth, but have rejected a Messiah who came down as a servant and a sacrificial lamb, a Messiah who is a divine being. Buddhism and Hinduism are in the bottom left, connecting to the divine through humility and communing with the natural world. They don't have a singular, monotheistic view of a divine being, and one physical ruler on earth coming and establishing a perfect kingdom. Quote-unquote Christianity is at the top left of the grid, emphasizing God's divinity and sacrifice through Jesus as a suffering servant. They do not stress Jesus coming back to earth as a human and ruling a physical kingdom headquartered in Jerusalem. They stress the spiritual at the expense of the physical. But none of these approaches to knowing God considers the fullness of God's character. Throughout the Bible, God and Jesus are referenced using one or more of these characteristics, pointing to Jesus as the fulfillment of God's promises to Israel and his divine right as king, because he suffered as a human on the earth and will return as a ruling Messiah.
Most of Christendom, and I'm saying 90% of Christendom, does not believe in a 1,000-year reign. They believe that we're going to go to heaven, and this is all allegory. But when you put those four attributes together, you see that this being, if he does not come back and establish this reign, it actually would disqualify him from being the Messiah. So he absolutely has to fulfill the rest of the prophecies, otherwise humanity is totally lost. Now, obviously, he is the most famous human being on earth. If Jesus Christ had an Instagram account, I think you'd have 8 billion followers. Okay, way more than my 20 views. So we're looking for people who've never heard of Jesus Christ. So we went to Guatemala one time, and we, with some Mormon missionary friends of ours, and we're like, hey, let's go in some remote part where people have never heard of Jesus. He's like, dude, that's not that easy to find. He goes, well, there's this one little place. It was in the middle of nowhere. We got in a boat, and then we got into another boat, and then in an island, and we're like, so this is as remote as you can get. He goes, yeah, this is as remote as I know. And we're looking around, and this was a dark, dark place. I mean, you could just feel the demonic presence. But we started talking to people, and everybody knew who Jesus was. They rejected him, but they knew who he was. So you got this middle of nowhere back country that knows about a Jewish Messiah. And it's like, I go, anybody in this island that would never really even have heard of his name? And the guy's thinking, he goes, there's this one guy that he's really deep in the jungle, but nobody goes and talks to him. I'm like, well, why? Well, what's his story? He goes, he's kind of like the witch doctor. They say he's kind of a cannibal, and there's rumors that he ate somebody's heart. Like, you guys want to go talk to him? I'm like, no, I'm good. Just here, give him a track, and we'll see you later. The point is, finding somebody who's never heard of this being is virtually impossible. Even the Jews, there's 14 million Jews. COVID created a search. The number one searched term in Hebrew in Israel during COVID was, who is Jesus of Nazareth? One of the ministries that we support, their views look like the expansion of the money supply chart. Remember the money supply that we did this? This is the views. This is not people that are converting, but this is Hebrew-speaking people that were Googling who is the Messiah or who is Jesus Christ. It's very fascinating. All right, so that's all we got, right, Phil? So, questions or comments? Yeah, sometimes we think, oh, this is right, this is wrong, and sometimes like, no, the right is in the middle, and it's straddled by two wrongs. And if you go too far to the right, remember that comedian? If you're in the far left or if you're in the far right, you've gone too far.
So you mentioned a cultural war against marriage and our families, and then also against children. Combine that with potential nuclear war, and you can get a lot of death or potentially the eradication of human beings.
No, you get close to it. You do not get eradicated, because obviously if you let everybody on earth die, then the Messiah is totally worthless. What did he redeem? God has to come back and fix this mess before we blow ourselves off this rock. And it literally says that in Revelation. If he didn't cut those days short, there would be no life left on earth. So he will not allow the entire planet to implode. But he's going to come at the last minute and save the day. You know, the knight in shining armor, the white horse that saves the day. That's what this is being set up as.
Got it. Because I was wondering if, from your perspective, the dark forces are trying to either limit population or maybe even completely eradicate it so that the Messiah doesn't come, and then the counterpart is, what the good side should do is then always foment population growth and allow.
It's not population growth. It's an image. Remember, there's nothing problem with population growing as long as you destroy those images, husband and wife, because it's an attack. It's not an attack against population. It's an attack against God. Lucifer does not want this Messiah, this Jewish Messiah, to come back. That's what he wants. He's been running the planet for 6,000 years, and he wants to go another 6,000. He does not want to get evicted. He wants it to keep going. Well, the Jewish Bible says that as soon as Israel says yes to the marriage, he's going to come back. So what do? You make a ton of effort to make sure that the Jewish people never say yes to that marriage. And then there's another thing that says that this gospel has to get distributed to everybody on earth. And if you notice how many times the people have lost their lives distributing information basically about this Jewish Messiah to the uttermost parts of the world. But we're coming to the end of those two things. Like I said, trying to find somebody who hasn't heard of Jesus Christ in 2023 is a very difficult proposition. I'm sure there's a couple of people left on the planet, but you got to go hunt them down to find them. So the church has almost finished its job. Now we're waiting for Israel to say yes, and then you're going to start this millennial reign. And the Bible says, through the rejection of the Messiah, when Israel rejected the Messiah, it actually turned out to be a blessing for us Gentiles. We heard about this guy because they rejected him, and when Israel gets grenaded in 70 AD, all the Jews get diaspored all over the world. So they took these ideas and distributed them. So the explosion, the destruction actually almost served as seeds. The Roman roads were used to plant the idea of seeds of the Jewish Messiah to every nation on earth. And now every nation on earth knows about a Jewish Messiah. 2,000 years ago, nobody has ever heard of nothing Jewish. If you were a guy in Mexico or in Italy, you don't know about Israel, don't care. But today, everybody knows about Israel, about this coming Messiah. It's inherent, it's in our heart. And we're ready to accept him. We just have to go through the end of the labor pains. But it's not about population control, because it's not that if Satan destroys all the population, who's he going to be the boss of? He's a thug. He's like a gang. A gang does not want to kill everybody on the street. He just wants obedience from everybody on the street. That's what he wants. It's kind of what he wants too, by the way. The difference is that he wants it from a loving relationship, and this guy wants it from a force relationship. Let's talk about pain and pleasure. Notice that torture is prohibited by our guy, but Satan loves it. He'll move you into so much pain that he'll get you to say yes to whatever. Those guys that get confessions from the Russian, Chinese government. Oh, I confess, yeah. They're putting them through so much pain that the guy will say yes to anything. But look at even extreme pleasure. Let's call that the hookers and blow. That's prohibited from our guy. Why? Does he not want you to have the fun? No. God knows that this is a non-sustainable level of pleasure. Your brain ain't wired for that much crack cocaine, so it'll actually destroy you. You'll feel good for a little bit, but then you're going to pay it all back with interest. So he wants you to operate in this range. Satan, on the other hand, he'll drown you with fame. These poor actors in Hollywood, they get drenched with so much temptation. There's the chance of a poor guy coming out of that. I mean, it's unbelievable. Mel Gibson is one of them, by the way. You could tell that in his movies, he actually struggles for that right and wrong, and people that know him personally say that's actually the way he is. And if you notice the movies that Mel made, Apocalypto, which shows you what a pre-Apocalypto was basically this. It shows you what the world looked like in the Americas before Christianity came over. It was basically a bunch of crazy aborigines that are killing each other every day. After Apocalypto, he does Passion of the Christ, so he fast forwards to here. And then he does Braveheart. Braveheart was right around the Middle Ages when it shows the church, the gone array. Notice that Israel's history was broken up into the patriarchs, the judges, the kings, and the priests. The church history, you could say the same thing. There was the church fathers, and then there was the time where we did what was right in our own eyes. Everybody did their own thing. And then there was the kings, and then lately we have the priests. The point is that the church didn't do any better than Israel. We started falling and tripping up exactly like they do. And Braveheart was, when you see the priest in Braveheart, you want to kill the guy. The guy is so damn evil that if you don't become a liberal by the time you're done watching Braveheart, you're definitely not going to become a religious guy. But you see how the thing swings. The next movie that Mel has to make, and he's struggling to find out the next theme, is the second coming of the Messiah. But in his religion, he doesn't have a second coming of the Messiah. So he doesn't know where to shoot. He doesn't know what the next movie is. We've been trying to convince him, but we can't break through his Catholic background because Catholicism teaches that there is no 1,000-year reign, that we're just going to go to heaven and this is all going to end. And of course, at that point, the Jews go absolutely ape because they've been waiting for that kingdom ever since they got grenaded out of the face of the earth in 70 AD. They've been waiting for that thing for 2,000 years. They're shipping cows. They're getting ready to rebuild the third temple. The last thing they want is, that's like the crescendo of the entire Judaism. And you're going to say there is no crescendo, there is no climax. The movie ends, we all go to heaven, everybody. What? Did I offend somebody else? I like that face. She's laughing like, oh, I can't believe you just said that. All right? Ihor.
As a simple pupil, as a Christian, what should we do? What should we do? How we need to act nowadays?
Well, you need to act like you need to act like Jesus Christ acted. And by the way, as funny as that sounds, if you notice that every politician that tries to get elected, they try to fake characteristics of Jesus. They try to be strong. Putin, bad. I want to kick Putin's ass. But then they kiss the baby. So in order for you to be an elected official, the reason why Trump didn't make it, assuming that the election was even valid, is because he came across too much like an unloving, caring guy. Joe Biden, he had a little bit of love and Uncle Joe in the bank, and people fell for that stuff. So the best kings are ones that have grace and law. You have to have both. What do we do as members of the good team? Well, understand who the enemy is. Don't partake in any of the behavior of these people because that strengthens the other side. When you vote for righteous people. The Bible says that when the good people are in government, people prosper. When the wicked rule, the people groan. So do what you can to affect politics. Don't become part of the military-industrial complex. Don't fall into the East. We're taught that we have to hate the West, and the West is taught that we have to hate the East. Don't get involved in that battle. Don't become a zealot, and don't become a rebel. A Russian is a person that you should love as much as a guy that was born in Italy. What's the difference? It's just that I'm told that today I need to hate the Russians. By the way, in 1940, we were told that the Russians were our friends, and the Italian guy was the enemy. Okay? Because Italians and Germans and the Japanese, they were the enemy. The Russians and the Chinese, they were our friends. So in 1940, Russians good. 1950, Russian bad. Because now we have the Cold War, and they're not doing what we wanted. See, we wanted to exert influence over Russia, and Russia's like, screw you, buddy. We lost 20 million guys in World War II. What did you guys lose? 2? So we're not going to do what you guys want. We're going to do our own thing. And that's when the Cold War starts. We didn't give them the honor that they warranted for winning World War II. 20 million Russians got killed in World War II. 300,000 Americans, and most of them got killed in Japan. Europe was literally won by Russia. So that's all history that's lost. Just like the Cuban Missile Crisis, that was when we kicked Russia's ass. Well, the media in Russia says that's when they kicked our ass by getting our missiles out of Turkey. So, disconnect from the propaganda of both sides. Treat human beings like children of God, no matter what color, race, religion they are. And abandon this idea that all cultures are good and equal. All cultures are not good and equal. As a matter of fact, they all kind of suck in varying degrees. That's the only thing that really changes is the level of corruption, depending on how much of this Nimrod philosophy has flown down into your country. But until we get the right king sitting on the right throne, we're going to be living in a world that's a little off. So do your part, whatever you control, whether it's your body, whether it's your family, your business. There's a little piece of the universe that God grants you authority over. Turn that into a piece of that kingdom. Turn that into a piece of heaven. Like the Bible Project guy says, get the hell out of whatever portion of the world you can control. Tell Satan and his demonic demons that you don't belong here. And by doing so, you will be attractive to other people, you will expand the message, and you're going to prepare the world for the future coming Messiah. That's what our job is. We're supposed to preach and teach. We're not supposed to slash and gash. Jesus didn't say, go out and kill everybody and pour hot lead down their throat if they don't accept the Eucharist, which is what we used to do right around here. 1492 to the Jews, either convert or die. Now, if you're going to go to a Jew, and if there's one way to get him to hate Jesus Christ to the point that he'll never consider him being the Messiah again, wouldn't that be the thing to do? That's how I would do it. So, you see, once the church became satanic, we actually started working for him. We became idolatrous, and instead of obeying God, we're working for the enemy of God. So know who the two teams are. Work for the good team. Don't let the world, the flesh, or the devil into your life. You live a clean life, and God will be happy with you. He says, well done, good and faithful servant. You're not on this planet all that long. Notice the middle class gets all the attack. The morality's in the middle. God says, don't make me so rich that I don't need you anymore, and don't make me so poor that I'm starving all day long, right? So extreme poverty is over here, and extreme wealth. Notice the oligarchs. They don't need God. They got so much money, they don't need anything or anybody. And the extreme poor, they don't have time for God because they're so busy starving that they don't have time to read a book. In the United States, the middle class pays all of the taxes. The very wealthy pay nothing. The homeless guy, I assure you, he does not file a tax return. The middle class carries the entire weight. Now, why is that? Because that's the class that Satan is attacking. And the reason why we have that burden is our fault. If we had adopted God's way of economics, we would have a 10% tithe, voluntary, and that's it. There's no IRS in God's government. There's a 10% mandatory tithe that you pay to your religious institution, the priest, and if you don't pay it, it's considered theft. But that's it. There's no tax return. There's no IRS. There's none of that. And God says, if you could either pay me 10%, or you could pay Joe Biden 50%. And we chose. I told you, it's either God's bride or Satan's. I didn't even say it. All right, that's it.